How to create a simple Tinder app UI clone in Flutter. To build this Tinder clone, we want to get started with a user object which is holding the information of one card. So here we have then the image that is displayed here in this card and also the name and age. And therefore I have created first of all a new class with all of this information. And secondly, we want to make use of this user object to build a new Tinder card widget. Therefore, I have created already this stateful widget, our Tinder card, which is getting here our user information. And now we go into the build method, and here we want to start by first of all building the image. So we create here a simple container with this decoration image, and here we can then basically define the URL of our image, and we simply take then the URL from our user object. As a result, we have already the image displayed in our UI. And secondly, we want to wrap it inside of a clip rect widget so that we can make our image rounded. Therefore, I put here a border radius of 20 inside, and with this, the corners of our image are rounded. Next, we want to display some information here on top of our card, and therefore we can simply go inside of this container child property, and here we create then basically a column where we put our name first of all inside. So I create a new method build name, and here I create then two text widgets inside of a row so they are displayed next to each other. First of all the name and secondly the age. And with this we have here the name and the age displayed next to each other on top of our image. Next we want to align our text here to the bottom, and therefore I simply go to the column which is displaying our name and age, and before it we want to put a spacer inside so that we have here the maximum space and then our name. Let's also create here then the second part, which is the status of this user. Therefore I create here a new method build status where we put basically a text widget inside, and we also wrap it here inside of a row widget so that we can display here also a dot next to it. So I create here a dot by 12 pixels in width and height, and I give it a decoration, so we make it as a circle and give it a green color. And with this we have here this online status and also the text next to it recently active, which we have here inside. To make it more interesting, we also want to display here at the bottom some shadow, and we want to make then the text here in a white color. Therefore, let's change here first of all the text color, so I put it every time to a white color. And with this, our text is hardly visible if you have a light background color. Therefore, we also want to include a shadow. Simply go here back to your column widget at the top, and here we want to wrap it then inside of a new container, and we want to define here a linear gradient. So we define here two colors, a transparent color to a black color. And finally, we also define here the alignment of our colors. So our transparent color should start here at the top center location, and our black color should go up to the bottom center location, which is here. To see this linear gradient better, we will also remove here shortly our image. And with this, you see that our color starts here at the top with some transparent color, and here at the bottom we have then a black color, and we basically start here with our black color from 70% of the image height. Let's also put again our background image inside, and with this you have here this cool effect at the bottom. Next, we want to create the remaining part of the app UI, so we also want to create here a background gradient behind our image, the logo at the top, and here at the bottom we have 3 buttons. Therefore, we go back to our main page, which is holding here this Tinder card that we have built right now. And here around our scaffold, we want to wrap then another container with some linear gradient. And like before, we define here again two colors, so this time a red color and a black color, which are going from top center to bottom center. And to make this work, you also need to go to your scaffold, and here you need to set the background color to transparent. And with this, we also have here a linear gradient for our background. And finally, we create here the app logo at the top and the buttons at the bottom. Therefore, let's wrap our Tinder card inside of a column widget, and on top of our Tinder card we want to display our logo. Therefore, I create a new method which is creating here the text widget, and next to this text widget we create then a simple icon. And with this we have now on top of our card here this logo. And lastly, below our Tinder card, we want to display then our buttons. Therefore, we create here a new method, buttons, where we display some buttons next to each other. So we create every time an elevated button with a different icon. As a result, we have 3 buttons next to each other, and we also want to align them correctly. Therefore, we go into our row, and here we set the main axis alignment to space evenly so that we have some space between our buttons. Let's also make our buttons rounded. Therefore, we want to change the theme of our elevated button, and this is what we can do basically inside of our Material app. So here inside the theme data, we want to create an elevated button theme. And inside of it, we define that we want to have a rounded button with a size of 80 by 80 pixels. And with this, we have 3 simple rounded buttons next to each other. How to create a swipeable Tinder card in Flutter, whereas you can swipe to the right side to like a user, to the left side for disliking the user, and you can swipe up for super liking the user in Flutter. Let's start from scratch by building a Tinder card widget, and here I put the URL to the image inside, which is displayed in our card. And finally, we create a new Tinder card widget where we get first of all the URL, and this is what we want to display right now in our build method. Therefore, I create here a new build card method where I display first of all the image. So here we display then the URL image that we have defined before. As a result, we have here our first Tinder image card, and we also want to make it rounded. Therefore, I wrap it here inside of a clip rect widget and set the border radius to 20. And with this, we have here at the top and also at the bottom these rounded corners. Next, we want to make it interactive by swiping the card to the left, to the top, or to the right side. Therefore, let's go here to our card, and we want to put it inside of a new method, build front card, and around our card, we want to wrap then a gesture detector. And finally, with the help of this gesture detector, we can listen here to 3 gestures when we start our gesture, when we drag here around with the image, and also if we stop the interaction of this gesture. In all of these cases, we get some gesture details, and we want to put these details inside of a provider. So this is a state management which we want to use. So we get here the reference to our provider, and then we simply redirect here the details into these methods: start position, update position, and end position. First of all, to make use of the provider, you need to go to your pub/spec YAML file, and here under your dependencies, you need to include the provider package. Secondly, we want to set up the provider in our main file. Therefore, we go to our Material app and we wrap it inside of the change notifier provider. And with this, you can then define here a new card provider. So this is another class that I have created, which is extending this change notifier. And finally, within this provider, we want to create these 3 methods: start, update, and end. So all in all, if we now tap here on our image and swipe it around, then we are going inside of these 3 methods. And we want to get started by saving here the position after we swipe here our image to other positions. Therefore, we go here inside of this update position method. So every time if we drag our image around, we are going here inside. And then we want to update here our position of the image with the details of our gesture detector. Also, after we have changed the position, then we want to update our UI. And finally, we want to make use of this position to change the position of our image. Therefore, we go here back to our Tinder card widget. And here we go then to our cards and we wrap it inside of a builder. And we also use an animated container for doing later the position animation. For now, we will simply put the milliseconds to 0, so there is no animation right now. And lastly, inside of this animated container, you can then change the position of your card. Therefore, we use the transform property, whereas you can then translate here your image by the position of our provider. Therefore, let's get here simply the position from our card provider. So we access here this position. And with this, we can change here the position of our image. And then if we end with the interaction, we want to go back to the initial position of our image. Therefore, let's go to the card provider, and here if we end with the interaction on the screen, then we simply want to reset our position of the image. So I put the position again to this offset 0. Let's also try it out, so I can change here the position of the image, and if I end with the interaction, then he will always jump back to the initial position. Next, we want to smoothly animate back to the initial position instead of jumping back. Therefore, we create a new Boolean field which determines if we are currently interacting with the screen or not. So inside of the start position, we put this flag then to true. And finally, if we end with the interaction, then we want to set this flag again to false. And back in our Tinder card widget, we can then make use of this dragging field. So if we are currently dragging, then we don't want to animate here our animated container. However, if we are not dragging, then we want to do here an animation. So basically, if we change here the position, then this will be animated by 400 milliseconds. As a result, if I now change the position and I stop the interaction, then you see we have here always a smooth animation back to the initial position. Next, we also want to rotate here our image in case we swipe to the right or to the left side. First of all, we want to get within our Tinder card initState method here the size of our screen. And we simply want to put the size of our screen inside of our card provider. So we create a new method setScreenSize where we put then this size inside. So let's go to our card provider, and here inside we want to create a new field where we store our screen size, and we also create here the setter where we set then our screen size. And now with the help of the screen size, we can then determine here the rotation angle while we are dragging our image. Therefore, let's start by creating in our card provider a new field angle. And every time if we drag our image around, then we go here inside of this update position method. And here we also want to update then our angle. So we divide our current X position of our image by the screen width. And this ratio we want to multiply with the maximum rotation angle that we want to have while we are dragging here our image around. And finally, next to setting the angle, we also want to reset it again in case we stop with the interaction. So all in all, we have determined the rotation angle of our image. And secondly, we also want to go to our Tinder card to make use of this angle. Therefore, we use the angle to rotate our image around the Z-axis. And for this to make work, you also need to make sure that you translate around the center position of your image. So let's also get here the center position by first of all getting here some constraints. And therefore we want to change here our builder to this layout builder. And with this we get the constraints that we use for determining the center position of our image. So all in all, we have now determined the rotation of our image. And lastly, we want to make use of this rotated matrix. Instead of this matrix identity, we put then our rotated matrix here inside. And after this, we also translate here the position of our image. And with this, if I drag the image to the left side, it is rotating to the left side. And if we drag it to the right side, then it is rotating to the right side. And finally, behind the rotated image card, we want to add then multiple other image cards. Therefore, we want to create in our card provider a new field with all the images of the cards. And we also want to initialize this image list inside of our constructor. So we create a new method resetUsers. And here we create then all the images and all the cards that we want to display. And lastly, we only need to display all of these images inside of our list. Therefore, we go back to the main file, and here instead of creating one single Tinder card, we want to change it to a new method buildCards. And with this, we get then from our provider here the images that we install then inside of a stack. So we place then all of the images on top of each other with the help of the stack widget. Right now, if I drag this image around, you see we have no images behind, and this is because we drag all the images to this new position. To fix this, we want to add to our Tinder card a Boolean field isFront, and with this we determine if it is right now the front image or the other images behind. Let's also go to our Tinder card, and here we want to add then this Boolean field. And lastly, we want to make use of this Boolean field, so if it is set to true, then we want to display here our front card with all the interaction. However, if it is not true, then we want to build a normal card, and the normal card doesn't have all the interaction, it is simply the card with the image. As a result, if I drag here this image around, then you see we have behind it the other images. Next, if we drag an image, then we also want to remove it from the image stack and show here the next image on the stack. And secondly, we also want to determine if we have disliked, liked, or even if we have given it a super like our image. Let's start by defining an enum with the card status, so if we are liking, disliking, or super liking our image. And secondly, we want to detect this card status if we end with the interaction inside of this end position method. So if we drag here our image around and then we stop with the interaction, then the animation should do the remaining part and animate our image outside of our view. And because of this, we want to make sure that we set here this is dragging field to false. And with this, we can immediately start the animation. And lastly, we want to determine then the status of our card. So we create a new method getStatus, and depending on the x coordinate, we want to determine if we have dragged to the left or to the right side. So in this case, if we have moved our image more than 100 pixels to the right side, then it means that we want to like this image. And therefore we want to do now an animation to the right side. So here we get our status, and depending on this status, we want to animate then our image. For this, we create a new method like, and here we change then the angle and also the position. So here we simply change the position to the right side. And with this, if I drag here to the right side and then end with the interaction, you will see he is doing an animation to the right side by half the screen width. As you can see, our image is still visible on the screen, therefore we want to increase here this offset, so I put it here to 2 times the screen width. As a result, if I drag more than 100 pixels to the right side, then he is doing this animation. The problem right now is I cannot interact here with this next image, therefore we also need to remove this image that we have dragged away from the screen. Therefore, let's create here a new method nextCard, and inside of this method, we simply want to remove then the last image from our stack. And I also wait here some time because we need to wait until the animation is finished, and then we want to remove the image. And with this, we can drag here all of our images to the right side, and he will do the animation for us. Next, we want to drag also to the left side for disliking this image, or we want to drag up for super liking this image. Before we do this, we want to go back to our end position method, and we simply want to print the status on our screen. Therefore, we take the Flutter Toast package to display here the status on our screen. As a result, if I drag the image to the right side, then you see here the toast message like. And finally, we also want to implement here the other cases, so we want to add the dislike and super like functionalities inside of 2 methods, dislike and super like. Before we implement the methods, we also need to make sure that we get here the status, so we go to our getStatus method, and here inside we want to determine then the other directions. So if we change here our image by 100 pixels to the left side, then we dislike our image. And if we swipe our image by 50 pixels up, then we want to super like our image. Since you also can drag your image on the X and Y coordinate, therefore we also want to implement here a special case for this case. Therefore I add here the for super like, and here we make simply sure that the X coordinate is not greater than 20 in pixels. And with this, we make sure that if we drag up, then we have a super like, and we can maximum drag to the right by 20 pixels or to the left by 20 pixels. However, if we drag further, then we have a like or dislike instead. And next, we also want to implement then the dislike and also the super like methods. And here, like before, you can define the angle and also the position while you are animating. So in this case, we want to animate then to the top, so I subtract here by this offset. And for the other case that we have a dislike, then we subtract the position by the screen width. Let's also try it out, so I can drag to the right side for a like, I can drag to the left side for a dislike, and if I drag up, then we have the super like. And finally, after we have swiped here through the images, then our screen is here blank because we have no images anymore. Therefore, if this URL images list is empty, then we simply want to display here a button inside of the center. And if we press on this button, then we want to call the method reset users inside of our card provider. And with this, we reset here all of the images. How to build swipeable Tinder cards that display stems while you are liking the user, disliking the user, or super liking the user. Besides this, you can use the buttons to like, dislike, or super like a user in Flutter. Let's start by building first of all the different stems. Therefore, we go to the build cards method, which is displaying multiple cards inside of the stack widget. And now inside of the single Tinder card, we want to build then our stem, and therefore we simply go here to our build method where we build our card. And around it, we want to wrap then a stack, and on top of our card, we want to build our stems. Therefore, let's create here first of all a new method build stems. And here we get first of all the status of our card. So we have created this get status method in the last video. And this is returning the card status like, dislike, or super like, depending on how much we drag here to the right, left, or top. And now back in our build stems method, we use the status to determine which status we have. So if it is the like status, then we want to build here a stem with the text like and the color green. Let's also create here this build stem method. Inside of it, we create first of all a text widget, and around it we also want to wrap then a container so that we give it some decoration. We want to make it rounded, and we also give it here a border with the color that we have defined here at the top. And with this, if I drag here a bit to the right side, then you will see here that we have the like stamp on the top left corner of our card. Next, we want to wrap around our container here a transform widget so that we can rotate also this widget by an angle, which we define then here at the top. So we define an angle. And secondly, we also want to position our stamp to the top left corner. As a result, if I drag to the right side, then you see that our stamp is rotated and also more down and to the right side. And finally, we can do the same thing for all of the other stamps. So we also create a dislike stamp and a super like stamp. All in all of these stems have then a different angle, a different color, a different text, and they are also positioned here differently. And with this, if I drag to the left side, then you see this other stamp, and if we drag up, then you see this super like stamp. We also want to include an animating opacity for our stamp, and in general we want to start earlier with the stamp, because if I drag here now to the left side, then you see that the user gets pretty late the feedback. Let's start by showing our status earlier. Therefore we go to our get status method, and here inside we want to add a flag false. If this flag is then set to true, then we want to have here this delta of 100. Otherwise, we want to have a different delta so that we show the stamp earlier. Only 20 pixels need to be changed in position. And lastly, we also go here up to the place where we end with the position that we have included in the last video. And here we want to have then this false flag instead to true. With this, if I drag 20 pixels to the left side, then you see already earlier the stamp, and the same thing also for the other side, we see here the stamp earlier. And secondly, next to our get status method, we want to also implement here a second method, get status opacity. And here we basically check if our position has reached here the maximum delta of 100, then it should be displayed in full opacity. Otherwise, we have a lower opacity until we have reached here these 100 pixels while moving to the right or left side. Let's also use the get status opacity method inside of our Tinder card. So here next to the status, we also want to get here the opacity. And finally, we also implement this opacity inside of our stamp. So here we always put the opacity that we have calculated inside, and inside of our stamp, we also integrate here then this opacity by wrapping this opacity widget around. Let's also try it out. So if I reach here exactly 100 pixels, then we have the full opacity, and otherwise in between we have not the full opacity. Next, we want to implement the buttons. So if we click here on one button, then we also want to do the animation automatically without dragging. And this is what we want to do for all of the 3 buttons. And finally, we want to change the button colors depending on our dragging. So if we drag to the right side, then we want to have here the green button. And otherwise, if we drag here to the left side, then we have the red button or the blue button if we drag up. Therefore, we want to go to the build buttons method that we have created in the first part of this tutorial, where we have created these 3 buttons here. And now if we click then on one of these elevated buttons, for example the first button, this clear button on the left side, then we want to call here our card provider, and on this we call the dislike method, and this is also a method which we have already created for animating then to the left side. And the same we also do with the other buttons. So for our second button we want to call then the super like method, and for the last button we call the like method. And with this, if I click on the left button, he is animating to the left side, otherwise to the top or to the right side. And finally, if we drag here to the left or to the right side, then we also want to change the button color. So we have in each of our buttons inside the button style a foreground and background color, and these are the things that we want to change. Therefore, I go inside of this get color method that we have created in another video. And here inside we want to add another field which is called force. And if this field is set to true, then we want to force here our press color, which is basically here the color if I press on this button. And the same thing we also want to do for our border. So we have here also a border around, and here we also want to include a press state, and otherwise we want to display here a transparent border. So all in all, with this flag, if we set it to true, we are forcing then here this red, blue or green color. Therefore, let's go back to our build buttons method, and here at the top we want to get then the status. And here we determine if we are currently liking, disliking or super liking our image. And we can use these boolean fields then inside of our force methods. So I simply go here inside and put the right boolean flag inside. So for the icons clear, which is here on the left side, we use the is dislike boolean field, and for the other ones we use here, for example, the is super like field, which is here for the one in the middle, which is here the star. And lastly, we put here also this is like field inside of the button favorite that is displayed here on the right side.